What if everything you believed about trust was a lie? What if the very thing you were told makes you good, makes you human is, in truth, your greatest weakness? From the moment we're born, we're conditioned to trust. Trust your parents. Trust your teachers. Trust the law. Trust the media. Trust the experts. Trust the system. But history whispers something darker. It tells the story of loyalty betrayed, of innocence exploited, of good people destroyed not by enemies, but by those they trusted most. A man confides in his best friend. That friend sells him out for power. A nation trusts its leader. The leader lies, smiles, and leads them into war. A woman falls in love, and that love becomes a cage. And yet we keep trusting, blindly, repeatedly, desperately. Why? Because trust feels safe. It's comforting to believe someone has your back. But in a world where people wear masks more often than truths, trust can be fatal. This is not a story about becoming heartless. This is a story about waking up, because there was a man who saw the truth centuries ago. He watched kingdoms fall, friends turn, empires bleed, and from the ruins he issued a warning. Trust is a weakness. That man was Niccolo Machiavelli, and he may have understood human nature better than we dare to admit. When you hear the name Machiavelli, you might think of evil, ruthlessness, cold calculation, a man whose very name became synonymous with manipulation. But Niccolo Machiavelli wasn't a villain. He was a mirror, a brutally honest observer of a world drenched in blood and betrayal. Born in Renaissance Florence, an era of shifting allegiances, conspiracies, and public executions, Machiavelli didn't write from theory. He wrote from survival. His most infamous work, The Prince, wasn't a manifesto for cruelty. It was a guidebook for reality, a handbook for rulers who wanted to stay alive in a world where morality was a costume and trust was a trap. In one of his most disturbing yet revealing lines, he wrote, "Men are ungrateful, fickle, liars, and deceivers." It wasn't bitterness, it was realism. Machiavelli believed that most people, when given the chance, will act in their own self-interest, even at the expense of those they claim to care about. So, what does this mean for trust? It means that for the powerful, for leaders, rulers, and even revolutionaries, trust is not a virtue. It's a gamble. And in high-stakes power games, gambling leads to death. Machiavelli warned that if a ruler is too trusting, too noble, too idealistically, be devoured by wolves who wear sheep's clothing. That's why he famously said, "It is much safer to be feared than loved." Not because fear is inherently better, but because love is fickle. Fear is reliable. You can fake love, but fear, that's harder to pretend. He also made a sharp distinction between appearing moral and actually being moral. A prince, he said, should appear just, merciful, and trustworthy, but be ready to betray those ideals the moment survival demands. It thus isn't sociopathy. It's survival in a world that rewards deception and punishes. So the question becomes, in a world where virtue is a mask and betrayal is strategy, is trust anything more than a beautiful lie? This is the Machiavellian Framework, not a call to cruelty, but a call to awareness. Because behind every throne, every handshake, every promise, lurks the question, what is this person really after? We like to think of trust as a choice, conscious, rational, deliberate. But what if it's not? What if trust is less about logic and more about biology? long before skyscrapers and constitutions, before currencies and courts there were tribes. Small, fragile groups of humans huddled around firelight, surrounded by predators, cold, and hunger. And in that world, one thing mattered more than strength, more than intelligence, more than even survival itself. Cooperation. To cooperate, we had to trust. That's where it began. Evolutionary psychologists believe trust is hardwired into our brains, not because it's noble, but because it was necessary. In a hostile world, isolated individuals died. Tribes survived. And trust, that was the glue that held the tribe together. We're still carrying that wiring, but we're no longer in the jungle, and this is where the danger begins. Today, that ancient instinct is hijacked not by tigers or rival clans, but by manipulators, marketers, cult leaders, and politicians. We trust because it feels good literally. The hormone oxytocin, often called the love drug, floods our system when we bond with someone. It lowers fear, boosts empathy, and builds connection. But oxytocin doesn't care if the person is lying. It rewards the feeling of closeness. The truth. That's how trust bias works. Once we've trusted someone, we tend to keep trusting them, even when the red flags are obvious. We override logic with emotion. Take the Milgram obedience study. Ordinary people were told to administer what they believed were dangerous. Electric shocks to strangers, just because an authority figure in a lab coat told them to. They hesitated. They were uncomfortable. But they trusted the system. So they obeyed. Then there's the Stanford prison experiment. Normal college students played guards in a fake prison. Within days, they became abusive, cruel, and authoritarian. Why? Because people trusted the role, the uniform, the structure. These experiments weren't about sadism. They were about how easily trust in roles, institutions, and norms can override morality. Now scale that up. Think of how governments manufacture trust during wartime. How corporations use emotionally charged branding to appear human. How charismatic leaders engineer loyalty by pretending to understand your pain. This is weaponized empathy. They don't just earn your trust, they build it strategically, using smiles, stories, and symbols. Once you're emotionally invested, they can lead you anywhere. And then there's in-group favoritism. Our tribal brain again. We're hardwired to trust us more than them. But in modern life, those lines are artificial, drawn by algorithms, media, and marketing. We think we're choosing, but more often than not, we're responding to evolutionary scripts that manipulators have learned to exploit. So the next time you feel that warm sense of trust, pause. Ask yourself, is this trust earned or engineered? Because the more human you feel in that moment, the more vulnerable you may be. Betrayal is not a glitch in human history. It's a feature across centuries and civilizations. The same fatal pattern repeats. Someone trusts and someone else takes advantage. Let's start with the most infamous betrayal in Western history. Julius Caesar and Brutus. Caesar, dictator of Rome, military genius, adored by the masses. But behind the cheers and laurel crowns, there was paranoia. He trusted Brutus, a man he considered like a son. Brutus, the noble Roman, the idealist, the insider. But trust does not stop ambition. On the Ides of March 44 BCE, Caesar entered the Senate unguarded. He believed his status protected him. Instead, 60 conspirators closed in, knives drawn, and Brutus, his most trusted ally, delivered one of the final fatal blows. Et tu, The Caesar died in disbelief, not just from the wound, but from the betrayal. It wasn't just a murder, it was a warning for eternity. Even the most powerful fall when they let their guard down. Fast forward nearly 2,000 years, 1938, Munich, the world stands on the edge of war. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain flies to meet Adolf Hitler. They shake hands, smile for cameras. Hitler promises peace. Chamberlain believes him. He returns to London, waving a signed agreement. Peace for our time. Months later, Hitler invades Czechoslovakia, then Poland, then Europe burns. Trust-well-intentioned, idealistic cost millions of lives. Because trust, in the hands of the wrong person, isn't diplomacy. It's a loaded gun now, to a different kind of battlefield. Wall Street, Enron, Bernie Madoff, the collapse of financial trust. Enron's executives were hailed as visionaries till the lies unraveled. Billions vanished. Thousands lost savings, pensions, futures, all because they trusted what they were told. Then came Bernie Madoff, the man who built an empire on a lie. Friends, charities, institutions, they all believed in him. He betrayed them all. His Ponzi scheme, the largest in history. They didn't lose because they were dumb. They lost because they trusted. But perhaps the darkest example is found not in politics or finance, but in faith. Jonestown, 1978. Jim Jones, a charismatic preacher, promised salvation, a utopia in the jungle. People gave up everything, families, identities, to follow him. He built trust by mimicking empathy, love, God, and then he turned it into control. When paranoia overtook him, he ordered the unthinkable. Over 900 people drank poisoned Flavor Aid. Mothers gave it to their children. It wasn't suicide. It was murder by trust. These stories are not just echoes of the past. They are reflections of now. Every system, be it a government, a business, or a belief, relies on trust to function. But trust can be engineered, manufactured, weaponized. The most successful manipulators don't take power by force. They earn your trust first, and then use it against you. That's the thread connecting Caesar to Enron, Chamberlain to Jonestown. Trust, once given blindly, becomes the leash by which power controls the masses. So what do we do with this knowledge? We don't become paranoid. We become precise. Because history doesn't just warn us about betrayal. It reminds us who survives it, the skeptic, the observer, the one who asks, who benefits from my belief? We like to believe we're smarter. Now that in an age of fact-checkers, data privacy laws, and 24/7 information, we can't be fooled like the people of the past. But if anything, we're more vulnerable than ever because the game has changed. Today, trust isn't earned. It's engineered, manufactured, optimized, A/B tested. You don't just trust people anymore. You trust pixels. Let's start with parasocial relationships, a term from psychology that now defines the digital age. You follow a creator online. They speak to you directly, intimately. They show you their morning coffee, their crying breakdown, their unfiltered realness. You feel like you know them, but they don't know you. This is simulated intimacy, a one-sided connection that feels mutual but exists entirely in your head. The moment you trust them, they become a gatekeeper. And whatever they sell, an idea, a product, a political belief, slides past your skepticism like a trusted friend's advice. Influencers didn't invent this. Corporations did. When brands like Apple or Nike talk about values, they're not appealing to your logic. They're speaking to your identity. Your tribe, when Amazon tells you we care. When oil companies launch green initiatives. When fast food chains use rainbow logos in June, they're not being transparent. They're being strategic. It's not honesty, it's optics. This is called false transparency, the illusion of openness used to disarm criticism. By showing just enough vulnerability, they simulate accountability. You think they're just like us, but behind the curtain, a machine calculating engagement, conversion, and trust metrics in real time. Even politicians have mastered this. They tweet like comedians, post like influencers, and cry like actors. The Sutan podium archetype is outdated. Now it's hoodies, podcasts, and unscripted interviews in living rooms. Relatability is no longer a side effect. It's a weaponized aesthetic. And at the very core of this ecosystem are algorithms. Your feed doesn't reflect your choices. It reflects what has been chosen for you. Content is filtered, fed, and repeated based on one goal: build trust, sustain attention, shape belief. Even AI is learning the language of trust. Chatbots mimic empathy. Virtual assistants apologize. Recommendation engines feel eerily accurate. But these aren't feelings. They're programmed responses designed to keep you engaged. And behind it all, data, your habits, your emotions, your digital fingerprint. Not used to protect you, but to predict you. Because in this world, trust is currency. And whoever controls it controls behavior, markets, elections, entire realities. Machiavelli warned about this centuries ago, that perception can be more powerful than truth, that a leader need not be good, only seem good, that trust can be sculpted like clay, but even he couldn't have imagined a world where machines manipulate perception at scale, where entire populations trust what they never truly see. This isn't paranoia, it's precision. So the next time you click like, the next time you feel a creator gets you, the next time a corporation seems human. Pause, ask yourself, is this trust genuine or is it engineered? Because in the digital age, whoever controls trust controls the future. Let's pause. After all the betrayal, the manipulation, the psychological traps, after everything Machiavelli, history, and modern systems have shown us, how do we live? Because here's the truth. We can't function without trust. Every time you board a plane, you trust the pilot. Every time you take a pill, you trust the doctor. When you send your child to school, you trust strangers with their life. When you fall in love, when you speak honestly, when you go to sleep at night, you trust to exist in a society. Any society is to extend trust every single day. So if trust is so dangerous, why can't we escape it? Here's the paradox. Trust is both our greatest strength and our most lethal weakness. That's the human condition. And perhaps Machiavelli didn't want us to abandon trust altogether. Maybe his warning wasn't don't trust, but rather do not trust blindly. There is a difference between assumed trust and earned trust. Assumed trust is the default. It's the kind that manipulators rely on. It's unearned, unquestioned, instinctive. Earned trust is different. It's built slowly. It demands consistency, transparency, accountability. It assumes deception is possible and guards against it. We don't need to become paranoid hermits. We need to become strategic realists, to trust but verify, to empathize but not be naive. to believe in others while protecting our own agency, because the world doesn't need more cynics. It needs thinkers, observers, people who ask, who benefits from my trust? Have they earned it? And what's at stake if I'm wrong? This isn't fear, it's awareness. Trust but never sleep. Because even in peace, someone is. Always watching, waiting, for you to let your guard down. So we return to the question that began it all. What if everything you were taught about trust was designed to weaken you? Machiavelli never asked us to be cruel. He asked us to be clear-eyed. To understand that in a world ruled by ambition and self-interest, trust is not a virtue, it's a transaction. He wasn't cynical. He was observant, a realist in an age of idealists. He saw that morality is often the mask of the powerful and trust, the leash they use to pull the naive. But this isn't a call to abandon trust. It's a call to master it, to see it not as a sacred good, but as a weapon just like any other. Because in a world of wolves, the sheep who survives is the one who learns to watch. So remember, trust is not a virtue unless it's earned, and even then, beware.